I'm a marketing. My name is Shraddha, and I am a marketing coordinator here at Enactus Canada. If I'm gonna request everyone to update their names to their first and last name so that we can take attendance. And I encourage everyone to mute themselves and camera is on optional. Save your questions for the end or put them in the chat. If you have any technical difficulties, I will try my best to help you guys. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you Brandy Barry, Director of Social Media at Canadian Tire. Brandy serves as the Director of Social Media at Canadian Tire, where she leads the Social Center of Excellence for CTC. With nearly 2 decades of experience spanning various facets of marketing, including e-commerce, digital marketing, and social media, Brandy is a strategic thinker with a deep passion for all things digital and social. She's committed to innovation and always pursues emerging trends, tools, and technologies to drive results and add value. So without further ado, let's dive in. I'll hand it over to you, Brandy.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I'm super excited to be here. Anytime I get the chance to talk to students, I always love doing so. Social media is one of those topics that I feel like everyone has a lot of passion for, and it's still an area of marketing that's emerging and that I still love meeting with people who also share that passion. I'll jump right in, just a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. I'm hoping to keep it really conversational. So if you do have any questions, just put them in the chat and don't be afraid to ask. We can also hold them to the end. I saw that we had been asking some questions on Instagram and they were really, really great questions. So I want to make sure that we leave time for that at the end. So a little bit about what we'll cover today. I'll just quickly dig into who I am and how I got to Canadian Tire and my background. I've done a lot of different things in digital marketing, and I think it's an interesting story when you start one thing and you think you're going on a certain path and then you end up somewhere else. That's sort of how I ended up in social media. We're going to talk about social media evolution. I've been working in social for about 10 years, and it's not that much older than that. So I've seen a lot of changes over that period, and most of them have happened in the last few years. So I think it's changing a lot more rapidly. So staying on top of that can feel a bit daunting. I'm going to talk about Canadian Tire strategic approach. We revamped our strategic approach to social a few years ago, and I want to walk you through how we did that, how to create a social media strategy, how the local strategy differs from your national strategy. So like Enactus, we have local pages. So our stores have local Facebook and local Instagram, and how they connect to the national page and how their content strategy differs from ours. We can dig into that. And then I have some slides on innovation. I think depending on the interest, we can see how much we want to dig into that or how much we want to get into some questions. So just quickly, who am I? I graduated from Western University with an undergraduate in political science. I was going to go to law school, but I ended up working in between while I was studying and stumbled upon this internship in marketing and PR at a film and production company and absolutely fell in love with marketing. So at that point, I pivoted and I knew that I wanted to go back to school and get some formal marketing experience. So I went to Humber College and did my postgraduate degree in marketing management. To finish off that program, you needed to do an internship, and that's how I landed in publishing, where I worked for a few years. So I worked at HarperCollins Canada in their marketing and PR department, very much on the traditional side of marketing, and that flowed into my job at Harlequin, where I again was more of like a traditional marketing specialist. But what happened around that time, and I'm going to date myself a little bit here, is ebooks came about within publishing, and we started using Amazon to market those ebooks. So I was in charge of Amazon because I had an interest in digital, and that's how I kind of got into the world of digital. From there, I worked at the Shopping Channel where I was a web merchandiser, and basically that means you're merchandising web pages and sending out emails and curating strategy based off of your web experience. From there, I went to Canadian Tire, and I have been here for the last 12 years. So I've done a bunch of different things at Canadian Tire. I was brought in for my web merchandising experience to relaunch their e-com experience. Canadian Tire didn't always convert and transact in e-commerce, so I was brought in to launch that. And then I quickly started growing. Was brought into social because I was managing all of the digital marketing as part of that digital marketing manager role. And social was new, and as an ecom marketer, I really didn't want to get pigeonholed into social at the time, where that was the only thing I was doing because I was a digital marketer. But my boss at the time was like, you want to work on more strategy and you want to do bigger things. Social can give you that. You're just not seeing like the direct progression. So I took a chance on social. I did that for 3 years, and then I moved into more of a traditional marketing manager role, where I was still heavily focused on digital marketing because that's how marketing has evolved at this point. We still do like TV at home in more traditional formats, but social has definitely, and things like YouTube and online video and streaming services have definitely taken over and kind of balanced out those more traditional elements over the last few years. And then again, the opportunity came around 2 years ago to start working back on social media in a dedicated role to build out our social center of excellence. We have a lot of big banners. We have Marks, Sport Chek, Canadian Tire. We have a bunch of own brands that we operate social for, and there was a need to standardize across such a large organization what our brand standards are, which vendors we work with, which contracts we onboard, to be able to take advantage of the scale of a company of our size and drive efficiency. I also operate day-to-day execution for the Canadian Tire channels and some of the owned brands. Like more recently, we just relaunched our Hudson Bay channel. So that's been a super exciting thing this week. So that is me in a nutshell and how I got to this role. Obviously, a very passionate social digital thinker, having done the more traditional kind of 360 side of it as well. I can see how marketing has evolved over the last few years. And like I said, that is hugely driven by social media and the changes happening in that space. Today, social media is used for so many different reasons, from entertainment to search and discovery to connecting with friends and family. Social media is at the heart of daily life for most people. And if you think back to just 10 years ago and what the social space looked like, it was very different. The channels were really different. The way people engaged was different. Content was extremely different, very cookie cutter, overly curated from brands and from regular people. And the biggest thing that's happened over the last few years was really the rise of influencers and the content that they were creating, and that began to change the space. Their content was successful because it was real. And with the addition of TikTok, it really had that full evolution by the nature of the platform and the For You page. Anyone with a good piece of content could go viral. It's a really unique algorithm that allows your For You page to be extremely curated to your exact interests and serve that perfect content based off of those consumption patterns. And we wanted to take advantage of that. So a few years ago, we noticed how much of an impact that pop culture and trends were having on the social space. And we wanted to get involved. And that content that was really resonating with creators and their channels, brands were starting to get involved. So this meant less curated, lo-fi, shot on iPhone, and native to the platform, which was really what was trending, and driving pop culture trends. The water cooler conversations that we were seeing were about trends on TikTok, not just what was happening in more traditional forms of media. And brands were starting to get involved in really fun and playful ways. A couple of these are a little bit older examples, but I still really love them because you can just see how reactive the internet can be and how brands are quickly getting involved, and this is happening way more. But when this happened, it was very unique that Taylor Swift was at her first Chiefs game, and a fan on Twitter reported that she was spotted eating chicken nuggets and Seemingly Ranch. And within weeks, Heinz was capitalizing on this brand opportunity in selling Seemingly Ranch. And it's one of those things that doesn't have that mass exposure, but to the people that were a part of that, it's one of those, if you know things. And it's not even really just to drive sales, although I'm sure it did, just because it's unique and it's very curated and exclusive, which is even more, people want that even more. It was to drive relevance and positive brand sentiment, and only social can do that. And we also started to notice that it wasn't just driving pop culture and conversations, it was driving conversions. And this wasn't in the traditional sense that brands like were marketing on social and selling products. It was regular people discovering and sharing content that would go viral. Things like the viral pasta with the feta and tomatoes led to North American shortages of feta for a small period of time. Um, Mom influencers in Utah are part of the reason why Stanley became almost $1 billion brand within a few years, in driving that exclusivity. We wanted to revamp our strategy. So what we did was identify the three areas of our business that were really important to us. So first and foremost, was our organic strategy. And that's how we were going to create that one-to-one daily connection with our customers. And we needed that social strategy to be built off of our brand foundations to really ground us in the work that we were doing every day in social. And you'll see as we kind of dig into that by focusing on trending content and seasonal insights and like community stories, we were really able to increase reach and direct engagement in social in ways that we never have before. We're going to dig into that on the next slide. I'm probably not going to dig too much into the commerce side because I think it's a little bit different than what you guys do day to day. But I do want to mention it because it is, especially as a retailer, a huge part of what we do, and driving sales is always a core KPI for us. One of the main ways that we do this is through our weekly flyer. And as traditional formats like the weekly flyer have decreased in reach, one of our biggest challenges in digital and social is how we increase the reach of that flyer in new channels and break through in ways that drive social commerce. And last but not least, local and community. Our army of 500 plus local Facebook and Instagram pages that are operated by our stores or who bring to life who we are on a local level in communities across Canada. And they're super important. But I think what's really important is that balance between what the national page is doing and what those community pages are doing. And that's obviously not easy when it comes to dealing with over 500 people. I can stop quickly and just see if there's any questions, or if you want me to just keep going, I can take questions at the end. Okay, we'll keep going. How to build an organic strategy. So I think this is one of the most important things that I could probably teach someone. I built many social strategies across Canadian Tire for some of the own brands that we own, like Paderno, Woods, and most recently our Hudson Bay channels. I have some tried and true principles on how you want to ensure that you're building that right social media strategy for your brand. So first and foremost, you're going to want to establish your purpose. This anchors your social strategy and should be rooted in your brand foundations. So for Canadian Tire, this as Canada Store, we exist to support life in Canada. So as a result, our organic social media channels, we want to reflect that unique relationship between Canadian Tire and the people who call Canada home. So next, that we want to define that target because Canada is a wide country. Canadian Tire sells a lot of things and we can't be everything to everybody or it wouldn't look very cohesive. The narrower your target, the easier it is to deliver the right content to the right people. So our core target is Canadian families. They're the ones who shop the most across the categories that we sell. So they are our largest target. Not that we don't have secondary targets, but they would be our core target. So as we look at creating content for Canadian families against life in Canada, we want to define what our strategic content pillars are. So these will be the buckets of content that guide your daily content calendar creation and content outputs. This will be your North Star as you draft your content calendar and ideate content. So for Canadian Tire, our core pillars are seasonally driven against the jobs and the joys of the season, focusing on product, brand driving moments, and community. you determine your content approach within those pillars. So, for example, you could take an editorial approach, like as something we would be doing on the HBC side, whereas Canadian Tire, we play more into trends and what's happening within pop culture in a way that is more social first. So for us, we want to seamlessly just fit into the feed in a way that resonates with our core target. So that means creating social first content that speaks to the everyday needs of Canadians, while also having some fun with those pop culture moments and trends where it makes sense for the brand. And that's not always the case. I think that's the hard part with trends, and we could talk about that in a minute, is seeing what's trending and determining if that's a good fit for your brand. Currently on the Canadian Tire side, we have a 50-50 balance between planned and reactive content. And I would say that the reactive content is what is outperforming that kind of more planned brand content. From there, you really want to determine where your priority channels are. So you can't put your effort everywhere, and every channel is different. And if you want to do every channel properly, you should have unique content for each channel. And I know as social media marketers, that's our biggest challenge, is always having content. I will say that like lo-fi content approaches have changed that a bit, where everything doesn't have to be so curated. And I think you can see in some of the examples, it's really quick and easy how that comes to life. But yeah, the priority channels, the cadence of content within those channels, and then what your voice and tone is, which flows from your content approach and your audience. So all of this, if you would think about this as a funnel, at the top is that broader purpose, and you start to narrow as you kind of go down that funnel. You want to set realistic expectations around the amount of content that you can output. I know lo-fi has made it a lot easier to output content, but I wouldn't try to take on too much. I think that quality over quantity is still kind of the important thing there. But don't always overthink something. Sometimes it is just a quick and easy output versus something that is overly curated. Measuring is number one. What might be working today might not be working tomorrow. You should be always optimizing and always watching what's working, especially in each platform, like I said. You want to follow the trends, but don't be afraid to set them as well. You don't always have to just fit in with everybody else is doing. You know your brand and what's unique, and that's how these trends start. So you don't be afraid to try to be a trendsetter. And innovation is always the key to evolution. And not everything that you do works, I think, is the thing when it comes to innovation. You can't be afraid to try things, and always innovate. And I have a whole slide on innovation at the end, and we can dig into that. Let me see where we're going next. I had a couple examples here, because I know trending content is always what everybody wants to talk about. And like I said, half of our content is this more reactive content at this point. But I wanted to differentiate between what a pop culture trend is, what a social trend is, and what some of the social formats are, which aren't exactly trends. So something like The Summer I Turned Pretty, that's playing into a pop culture social trend, where something like the open hand emojis is more of just a social trend. And something that we've started to do a lot more recently is play into social formats. So really utilizing the social feed and the different formats there. I think everybody probably saw a few weeks ago on Instagram, people did the super long, skinny image, and then it's just gone overnight. But if you're one of those brands that had a piece of content during that time, you are absolutely going to stand out. So I think with any of these things, the most important thing is being timely. Some of them also last longer than others. Something like print as a prop from a social format, that's something that you could see happening over years. But something like The Summer I Turned Pretty is really only going to be relevant while that show's airing. And even then, it's in the initial kind of start to the season when everybody's talking about it. But again, you want to make sure that as you're taking risks on trends and doing something different with social formats, that you're always weighing that that's the right thing to do for your brand. You don't want to be everywhere. You want to be in the right places. Just jumping into social commerce just for a minute. It's my only slide on it, but I just had to talk about it because it is something that's heavily growing in North America. As you see people like Amazon, Meta, Google, TikTok, and Pinterest heavily investing in social commerce and the customer experience in those platforms to purchase. So whether that's something like TikTok shops, where they're actually offering in-platform conversion, and it is a platform that's heavily driving sales, to platforms that serve to actually do live content and do transactions a lot easier, like something like a Twitch, which I just saw today. Elf launched a huge partnership with Twitch to do live shopping content, and they are going to be working closely with Amazon to make that content shoppable. So it's definitely something you're going to be seeing a lot more happening in North America. It's a huge trend in Asia. And so whether it's live commerce and live shopping in a platform like Twitch, or just conversions continuing to increase. And I know we think about TikTok as a platform that drives conversion, but Instagram is actually probably the biggest driver of social commerce in all of the platforms. So they all drive commerce. Local social media. So I think this is one that is super unique. Each of our 500 stores have local Facebook pages, and we have about 100 local Instagram channels on request from the stores. We work with them by providing governance. We have a social media policy around the management and running of the channels. We share best practices, content creation, and how to use these channels to better their business. We want to ensure that our local pages are differentiated from the national corporate channels. Some of the ways we do this is to encourage reinforcing that life in Canada on a local level. So where the national page serves to serve what Canada's needs are, your store is unique to you and your local market, and what life means will differ from community to community across the country. Enabling one-to-one connections with customers and allowing the store to feel more personal. These include meet the staff posts. Staff being in content always really performs. It creates that stronger connection to your community. Driving traffic to your store, we obviously promote national sales, but our stores can actually have in-store specific sales and pricing, and have reasons to drive people to their store on a local level. They often also will host events that are unique to their store in their channels, like grand openings, jumpstart events, and other local community fundraising. And driving store priorities, so where you would maybe have excess inventory or seasonal launches like garden center, Christmas, revised hours, those things that are really unique to your store. And as most social channels, customer service is always that direct connection to your store for feedback or questions or to solve customer issues. Most of our local pages are successful in leaning into trends like we are. Store staff are often hopping on trends like comparing Gen Z to millennials, fit checks, get ready with me, even just showcasing product in the store by creating content. Seeing a lot more stores creating really innovative content across many different levels, and it's really exciting to see. And I think that is that for that. Any questions? I have a quick video, but any questions before what I just kind of walked through? Okay, I'm going to hope that this plays with sound, but if not, the sound isn't crucial. There's text on screen, and I think we'll get most of it.
No way.
The back to its super sale at Canadian Tire. Let's go check out some of the biggest savings of the season. Make this up.
I think that there's some issues with the video. You guys are okay? Okay, I'll keep playing.
$15. Donna, start the car.
I'm in my Yes era. Shop my collection only at Canadian Tire.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm gonna pause it just because I think it's hard to see, but I can send through this presentation after, if anybody wants to see it. Basically, it was just showing all the different examples over the last year that we have had. Anytime we're playing into things like Taylor Swift or pop culture, it's an easy win for us. Obviously, you have to be careful when you're doing that because, I'm sorry, can everybody still see? Just making sure. Okay. You have to be careful because we obviously don't have partnerships with Taylor Swift, but it's always a hit when you can play into things like that. So I think I only have one more slide and then we'll have time for questions. Just wanted to touch on innovation because I think this is kind of the area where things are going. And I know some of the questions that I saw today on Instagram are in this space of what's next. So as we think about where we're headed long term, I kind of like to bucket things according to 3 different buckets: harnessing channels, technology, and creators. I think what's important is that we're always looking forward to see what's next, because if you're not onto that, you're behind. Customers are always demanding what they want from us, and how convenient it is, like that our success hinges on that. When it comes to channels, we want to look at using channels in different ways. So whether it be around commerce and your experience in the platforms, or converting like TikTok shops, or using social shops with creators to convert people. Live commerce is probably one of those bigger buckets that we're focusing on right now. And direct messaging, we've seen a lot happening within that space over the last few years. Technology, I think the thing that most of us are thinking about right now is AI, and it is rapidly changing the way we're doing marketing. I'd say there's still a lot of room to grow there, especially when it comes to creative. But I think we're seeing that space evolve very, very rapidly, and we are going to start to see more there very quickly. Whether that is moderating and managing the channels, or outputting content, or platforms that specifically are for AI type of content, we're already starting to see that emerging. So I think there's a lot more to come there. Creators, definitely still a space that's continuing to grow. Creator storefronts are becoming more popular. Sephora is launching on their website the ability for creators to go in to build out their storefront with their favorite products, and then share that with their audiences to monetize from an affiliate marketing perspective. Amazon has built an affiliate army of people who share and market their products essentially for free with just a small commission. So that's something that we're seeing other companies want to take advantage of. We're seeing a lot more longer term partnerships with brands and creators, so more like Sephora Squad affiliate programs. So that's definitely where you can find you're driving more efficiency than spending large amounts to work with creators on a one-off basis. And then the next big thing is, how do you scale that? Creators, it's hard, like they're complicated. You have to make contracts and you're paying them large amounts. So it's really hard to scale. The Amazon affiliate model is probably the easiest way to scale in that space. I do have some slides on each individual of these areas, but I don't think we really need to dig into them unless there's anything that people want to ask in the questions about any of these more specifically. We can dig in. I did also, I think we were chatting, I'm going to actually end this slideshow for now, but I know we were chatting ahead of the presentation, and I was thinking about some of the areas that of like opportunity that you guys would be interested in as the type of work that you do on a day-to-day basis. So how you're using the platforms to grow your teams on campus. So whether that's recruitment, as you think about content creation against that, what would people make you like, why would people want to join? What's that day in the life? Those get ready with me's, that type of content. And really thinking about how those trends can play into any of these types of content you need to create. Something like fundraising to get your teams to events. How do you kind of crowdsource that engagement, like this post to do X? Or I hate to say it, but like traditional contests always still really do well to grow your following and to grow engagement. But I do always still question whether that's a really authentic following or engagement, or if somebody's just doing something to get something. But it does definitely serve a purpose, and we've done it. We definitely do it. Introducing staff or team leadership, or even sharing projects. I think it's kind of the same as that first bucket to me. What's the best way to showcase this content in a way that's native to the platform and social first? So I think that's where we always kind of think those traditional, show somebody's name and their project, but like really thinking about the platforms and dynamically how to show that content, or if there is a trend or a social format that would play really nicely into that. Like using that newspaper kind of style headline to showcase an announcement or something could be a fun way at it. So yeah, I think trends, like every time I see a trend, I'm thinking about whether it's right for a brand or whether it's right for a moment, and just always seeing if something works. I'm lucky to have multiple teams that do that. Like I'm constantly thinking about it, but I have a moderation agency. I have creative agencies who are mining for these opportunities. But I will be honest and say that at the end of the day, my direct team and myself are always the ones who have the best ideas, because we know our brand the best. So as you're in your channels every day, you know who you are. Don't stretch to fit a trend that isn't right for you. It won't resonate with your audience, and it won't come across as authentic. And that's really the key to creating really great social content, is for it to be authentic. And then growing followers, I think, was probably the biggest question I always get. And my answer is that that's not easy. And even with millions of dollars in advertising budget, people they don't necessarily follow you, or they don't necessarily give you that engagement. So you can pay to reach people with whatever content you want, but that doesn't mean it's going to work. You need to have really great content, and that just happens over time. So that's where, as you look at a lot of these principles of really investing and building your organic strategy and your content outputs, that happens over time. And the most success I've ever had with growing our audiences within CT is not how much money I spent, it's how much time we focused on that content and what that strategy was, and really just plugged away at chipping away at doing it day to day. And that's what's gotten us the farthest. And I think as social is becoming more like, it's harder to get that attention and to get that engagement. People don't even like anything anymore. Like it's really hard to get that engagement. You really need to give people a reason to want to follow you and engage with you on a day-to-day basis. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I had. I could go through some of the questions too that I saw on Instagram today, because I thought they were really great questions. So I don't know if you want me to do that, or we have a lot of questions in the comments that we want to go through.
I see one question in the chat here from Seth. So he's asking how do we navigate leveraging trends versus navigating partnerships? Sometimes trends are quite tied to an individual who owns the trend. Could you help clarify where the line between using trends and stealing content is?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it needs to reach a certain scale before we're going to get involved. So I think it needs to be something that we're seeing happening in a lot of people's feeds for us to at least get involved in something like that. It is a fine line though, because there are proprietary things sometimes where if somebody is creating an original audio, or if there's like a graphic to go with it, technically they do own that. And so especially as a large brand, we would be super cautious about that, but there are times that we make that exception and do take a risk. I think it's just a fine line. Sometimes we would ask permission. I think for the average person using those trends or those things, it's not going to be such a big deal. But as a large company, you definitely do have to be careful. But I think when something hits a big enough point that it's mass is when we typically feel okay with it. But it's definitely risky. We don't always run these things by legal, which I think they would hate for me to be saying, but that is sometimes the case that things are happening really quickly. I think what we just have grown to know is how to navigate that space to make sure that we know we're not using any popular audios or things that we don't have the rights to. We're really, really careful on that stuff, especially when it comes to things that are mass media and pop culture. So, but can you talk about Taylor Swift's album drop without mentioning Taylor Swift or the name of the album? You definitely can. She doesn't own Orange. She doesn't, there's lots of albums dropping that day. So if you were technically saying who's excited for the album drop with an orange background, there's nothing she owns about that. So you just have to kind of know the line of which to cross or not. But we do have a ton of partnerships and we do create really great content with a lot of those brand partners, especially on the sports side. So we definitely would never be overtly talking about an athlete or a sports team or something like that without having the rights to that partnership. But if you're commenting on a post that somebody posted about a team that's doing well and you just said, great game today, that's the thing about social is that you can kind of be present in a moment by just being in the comments, which is something that we're doing actually a lot of now, that you can be present in a moment without actually having to really be creating content against it, which is interesting.
Perfect. There's some more questions here in the chat. Feel free to even unmute yourself and ask the questions directly. So the next question is from Michelle. Do you have any tips on how to create strategic content pillars for a startup brand?
Yes, I would say look at your brand foundations and what's really core to your brand and who you want to be talking about, I think is the biggest thing. Doing some of that audience work is really important. And I think by digging into your audience, you could figure out and knowing your business and your brand really well. So for us, as we approached our new strategy, something like brand love and things, brand truths is what we call them. Digging into the things that people say about us on a daily basis and really leaning into those because those are the things that people love about us. So how random our store is, for example, or how it smells like tires, like those are things that are endearing to people and that people love about us. So we embrace that as a content pillar. Obviously we sell products, so it's easy to have that be one of our pillars. And then brand, just things that drive our brand that aren't tied to things we sell. How do we do that? Those would be kind of, and community, I think, is our other big one, because we have that local level. So those would be three very broad ones, but within those content pillars, you have content series and content approaches. So if it's Fan Friday or whatever those things are, like that could be one of the pillars under community. So I think it's just knowing your brand, staying true to your foundations and knowing who you're talking to. Because you could be, for example, in the fitness space, but if you're talking to entry-level fitness people versus very experienced fitness people, how you would create that content and the messaging and the tone would be very different depending on that. So I think you're knowing your purpose, what you're there to exist to do in the space and who you're talking to, and you're knowing your product and your brand should guide that.
Perfect. I see your hand raised, Evan. I'm just gonna ask Cedric's questions first. When starting a brand account from scratch, what early actions make the biggest difference in building momentum, especially before you have an established audience?
I think it's just being consistent. And I think that's the hard thing when you're building a new account is showing up day after day and creating content to get not much engagement. And even as a large company, we launched our French dedicated channels for Canadian Tire last year, and we still only have a few thousand followers. And every day I'm like, we get a handful of likes, and we're like creating really unique, bespoke French content, and it's really great. And I'm like, nobody's seeing it. And how do you grow that? And I think sometimes it is just showing up day after day and being consistent. I would say that's where the measuring is important, because if you're doing that over an extended period of time and you're not seeing that growth, you should be seeing growth over time. So, even if that's going from 5 likes to 10 likes over, like, set what those benchmarks are. And sometimes you do have to pivot that strategy. Sometimes to get that kind of hook or get that in, like I said, like a contest or a partnership. I know a lot of creators, as they're trying to grow their space, they do things with other people, like contests with other people who have a larger following. Or you're getting out there, or you take a brand partnership that you doesn't pay as well just because you're associating with a larger brand that will kind of help you and your brand. So I think that's the thing. Like, we still do partnerships with people all the time on social and contests, just because somebody may have a different audience than us. So little things like that, but it really just is showing up consistently every day and creating content, and having that solid strategy to work against should make sure you're creating that content that's resonating with your audience.
Perfect. Evan, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question now.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'm a little under the weather here, but I know I asked a bunch of questions through Instagram, and just narrow it down to one question. I know earlier you were talking about not approving something through legal, and I know you were saying, you shouldn't be talking about that. We do the same thing as marketers, especially when we don't talk to our co-presidents or presidents beforehand. So I'm curious, what's a creative idea or a part of a campaign that almost didn't get approved but performed better than expected?
I saw this one. I liked this one. This is a good one, because there's always things like there's things I regret not doing, but one of the things that probably was the riskiest thing that we've done over the last year or two was around the Canadian Tire bucket. That whole, I don't know if people have seen it in our content, it's kind of become a pillar of our content. It kind of represents like that it works hard across the seasons, but we actually kind of stole that from Home Depot. And I say stole lightly. We were being very playful and bantering with them on social. They had posted their bucket as being like the hero of spring on their spring TV shoot. So we were playfully kind of messaging them and being like, well, our bucket's kind of the best bucket. And then Home Hardware even got involved. And it created kind of like a bucket war amongst the Canadian hardware space. So it was a fun thing that, like, it seems a bit risky to kind of poke at somebody who's a competitor of yours, but it was all in fun. And we actually do know their social team as well. It's a small space. So it was all in jest, but it actually has become a huge pillar beyond that of our content seasonally. We just had a Halloween bucket. We're having a Christmas bucket, and the bucket has gone to the Olympics. It went to the Taylor Swift concert. And it's just a way for us to talk about our brand, and to, as we think about things like a trend, something like Duolingo, like they always have their mascot to be able to, and that really strong brand presence. And the bucket has been one of those things for us. And if we didn't take that risk and be really playful with another big brand on social, none of that would have happened. So, and that was kind of our team just being like, should we just message about it and see what we think? And then it spiraled, and it's 2 years later, and now the bucket has become its own entity. And I hope they're not mad about it. It was all in fun.
Yeah, that's
I can
awesome. Thank you so much.
questions that we had on social too, because there was a couple good ones.
I have them here if you'd like.
Yeah, I think I have them here too. So
Okay, perfect.
deep roots and staying nostalgic. I think, especially with the younger generation, this was a good question, because it is a challenge, especially as we're looking at channels like TikTok, which is a much younger generation, and us wanting to be relevant with that younger generation. I think for us, things like those brand truths, that it doesn't matter what generation you are, if you've been to a Canadian Tire, those things resonate, and leaning into those, and depending on which platform that's how the content outputs, it reaches the right audience. So I think just really playing into trends, staying younger, trying different things has really appealed to a younger generation for us on social, and is definitely going to help our brand kind of move into a different generation. AI, talked about this a little bit. It's going to be changing everything. So if I could give one advice to anybody who's young is like really like learn this space, learn the potential it has, study prompting, think about how it drives efficiency in all areas of what we do within social and work life on a daily basis. Unlimited creative freedom for one
So
day.
sorry to interrupt you. Could I ask you one question on that AI
Yeah,
subject?
sure.
When you're talking about AI improvements, have you considered using RCS and even text message bots for Canadian Tire?
Yes, we have talked about that. It's definitely an area of opportunity for us in the direct messaging space. I think our promo team is using it a little bit in some of our weekly sales. Um, but from a social perspective, it's still not quite there for me, is what I worry about. And sometimes when you get something wrong, the impact of that is way larger than the efficiency that the other side can drive. I think we're absolutely going to get there with things like creative and messaging. It's just not quite to the point where we would probably trust it just yet. It's definitely cool and it's definitely coming, and it's coming way quicker than I think anybody can prepare for. So it's definitely one area that I would focus on. Like when I was first coming into my career, like what social was to change marketing and the digital space, that's definitely AI is way huger than that. The impacts are huge. Creative freedom for one day, and what campaign would I launch? I feel like this is a tough one, but one of the things I've really wanted to do lately was Canadian Tire merchandise. So like clothes and different types of merch. I think because there's a lot of love for the brand, it's such an iconic brand. I think that's something that we've wanted to do, that we've talked about doing. Non-retail brands that inspire us and why. I asked my team about this one actually because they're so entrenched in the space too. And I think we were all unanimous when we said that the library accounts are where it's at. And I thought that would be particularly interesting because of the education space. There are so many amazing library accounts, and they're really creating somewhat unhinged social content, which is unique for libraries. So I would definitely check those out. I can send through a couple examples that my team sent, which is unique. The other one too, actually, that last year, I think it was last year, as we had the Olympics, or the year before, and we're headed into an Olympic year in February this year, is the Paralympic team. They were on fire in the last Olympic Games, and their content was trending and it was amazing. So definitely check them out as we come to the next games. What's a recent campaign that didn't get approved but ended up, oh, we already talked about that one. Okay, so that's it. Any other questions?
I have some more questions here in the chat. This one's from Y. I hope I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right. I'm so sorry. Do you have any tips on how to balance a professional brand voice and a trending content?
Yes. I think it's always, and I think that's a hard one to do because I think we see trends and we get excited about them, and we just always want to try to think of a way for the brand to be a part of it. I think once you vet that it is right for your brand, finding that way in is sometimes difficult, and sometimes it could be right for your brand, but you just can't find the right appropriate way in. And if you don't feel really good with it, I think the thing that's scary about trends is that it could go really bad if you don't do it right. So that's where I would just always err on the side of caution. But yeah, I think that's where you have really strong brand foundations and that really strong strategy. You know exactly which kind of areas your brand can play in. But if you're ever on the fence about it, I would just definitely be more cautious than not, because you don't want to hit it wrong on social, because that can have a bad impact.
Right. Next one is from Mackenzie. Do you have any tips for successfully rebranding?
Rebranding. Yeah, I think on social, it's like you either go for it or not. Like, I think when it comes to if you're doing overall changes to your brand, I think like as we think about like the work we just did on HBC, like obviously it's a really strong brand and they had really good brand foundations. Obviously, we were onboarding the brand and we were going to want to take a look at that and tweak some things. But having those really strong brand foundations is what flows through everything else you're doing. So I think once you have that, like make sure you have that before you try to hit all of the other areas, because once you have your strong brand foundations, something like your social strategy should flow really easily through there, and just go all in and do it or not. I wouldn't try to do it in pieces. I like to completely overhaul it. So it's a really clean split in moving forward with that rebranding. And like, you know, if your content approach, your look and feel, your tone is just going to change, just do it and then start moving forward from that point on.
Perfect. These are great questions. We have time for two more, but before that, I'm just going to launch a small survey. It's going to take like 2 seconds. So please answer these questions. Perfect. I'm going to end the poll now. We'll move on to the next question. So next one is from Cedric. When preparing for a new product launch, how do you build anticipation in a way that feels organic so people are emotionally invested before the product even drops? It's a good one.
That is a good one. I'd say that it's probably multi-layered. Within social, we would probably seed it with creators. We would also probably in tandem create some content ourselves. It's always good to have a mix of creator content and brand content. They play different roles. And I think there's also different types of marketing content that you could create. There's content that can drive awareness of the product, but then there's content that can kind of give you the reason to believe behind a product. So really show it in demonstration and in use, and really try to pull people through that funnel. So start with the broader audience of really just trying to get awareness and make people aware of your product. But then as you kind of get their interest, pull them through that funnel and give them a reason why that product is great and show it more in demonstration.
Thank you. And we're going to do a last question. What's the process of turning an idea into a full-fledged cross-platform campaign at Canadian Tire? This is from Caroline.
That depends. So it can vary. If it's something like a big campaign and a big seasonal launch, that would be briefed by the marketing team. So something like Christmas or Olympics, those would start with a cross-functional brief that I would be part of as social, but there would be lots of other teams. So the marketing team would brief all of the cross-functional teams. We would all bring our pieces of the plan to the table, and then we would execute against that. So that could have TV, OLV, social, search, and then sometimes more traditional elements like an out of home, and that would kind of be a broader plan. Sometimes it's a smaller campaign. So if it's just something like back to school and we're doing some social videos and we're going to do a contest in social to drive some engagement and a few creators, that could be something that just gets briefed within my team and doesn't require all of the other cross-functional teams. So it really just depends on the scope of the project and the type of outputs that are required for the campaign.
Perfect. Thank you so much. A big thank you to Brandy for such an insightful presentation. I know I learned a lot today. So before everyone leaves, I'm just gonna have an important announcement regarding the third session. So October 23rd session has been moved to Monday, November 24th with Jessica Savage. And we will be sending out an email about that shortly to students who have registered. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Make sure you register for the upcoming sessions to earn your LinkedIn badge. And see you in the next one. Thank you.
Thank you so much for speaking today, Brandy.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, Brandy.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.